Today our inspiration is an English painter named JMW Turner. He was born 100 years before the Impressionists, but they have a lot in common. I'll show you. I love his compositions because I've always liked the abstract quality of them. They're very luminous and big shapes and color. And then it turns out that that's what he was interested in, color and light. And it was all even called sublime. The light is sublime. And I was intrigued because they look so modern for being 100 years before the Impressionists. Turner was a child prodigy. He got into the Royal Academy when he was only 14, and then he was apprenticed off to Sir Joshua Reynolds, some big guy. His oils are luminous because, and I didn't know that he did watercolors. I just fell in love with his luminous oil paintings. But it turns out, and you'll see from this video that I want to show you, that he started off only doing watercolors, and he would paint them on location. And then that's why as he developed, he began to paint oils, sort of like he painted watercolors. He favored the water and sun in his compositions because he was more interested in nature, not so much the figure, mostly nature, the power of nature versus the fragility of man. He was an English abolitionist in London, and he exhibited his most famous painting. He exhibited at some kind of abolition society. It was called The Slave Trade. It's really beautiful. I'll show you a picture of that. The way I want to just mention a few things about how he was like the Impressionists. They both were interested in light and color, primarily. They were both interested in nature. They got all their inspiration from observing nature. But the difference was that even though he did his sketches, the watercolors in plein air, his oil paintings were all done from sketches, in black and white sketches, that he did on location, but he did all of his finished work in the studio. So I want to share this video that I found so interesting, and you get to see a lot of his early work.
Turner's watercolors made light and color the purpose of his work. You see all this in the stunning panorama of 16 Turner watercolors sent down to London this month on loan from the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester. Many have not been seen in the capital before. Turner often started his watercolors when a young man in the 1790s by washing the entire paper with a single hue. That single color set a unifying mood and supplied the lighting for the whole work. Suddenly, around 1812, Turner began to apply a single underlying color to his oils and abandoned those strong contrasts of light and dark which gave old master paintings their strength and force. Increasingly, a powerful single color, typically golden sunlight, diffused over a whole canvas. Sometimes two contrasting colors would be underwashed, seen here in the cathedral city at Regensburg and on the rugged Alps above Chamonix. And you see the unifying color effect too in this 1827 watercolor at Petworth, dramatically here in the same year in the color beginning at Tivoli, and in 1845 in the moody alpine pass of St. Gotthard. Without the lesson of a controlling, underlying tone that watercolors taught, Turner's oils would have stayed 18th century in feeling and very documentary in flavor. Instead, the detail with which he started slowly vanished from his work down the decades. The color of the painting became its main purpose. Detail was suppressed, to allow the triumph of light. Watercolors first, the oils later. Without the discoveries in watercolor, Turner's oils would never have achieved the drama and modernity which no other art in Europe showed at the time, and makes Turner the abiding genius of his age.
The one that I sent you, the seascape that we're going to try to make look like a Turner today, I thought we would just do some warm-up exercises. So that's why I said have another piece of paper handy. But what I want you to do, I'm going to just do a quick demonstration for you before you start doing it yourself, listening to the music. So we're going to listen to the music that Aline was listening to, and we're going to practice a wet-on-wet exercise. So this is what you're trying to do in the next 2 minutes. After I show you a real quick demo of what we're going to be doing, but then you'll have 2 minutes all by yourself to listen to the music like she did and do something like this on a piece of 8 by 10 small piece of good watercolor paper. I'm using the back of something, so it's okay to use the back for these exercises. Let me show you how to get started. I think that I might put yellow down. I'm just going to use the 4 colors that I said we used in this picture that we're painting. Yellow. Oh, wait a minute, I gotta wet the paper first. I'm sorry, I forgot. Wet the paper all over the place. Really, really wet. And then drop in a color. I'm thinking maybe start with yellow. I'm getting it all over me. There you go. So I pretend I'm listening to the music and I'm just putting color on, letting it bleed around, hardly even looking at it, not really looking at it. Maybe just drop in some things, let them, see how it bleeds around if it's really still wet. Maybe we'll put a little bit of blue in. Blue. Maybe more blue, maybe a lot of blue, really dark. But see how it drips around and bleeds? And you have to use a lot of paint because it dries lighter, a lot lighter because the paper is wet. I'm thinking if I'm listening to the music, I might just kind of go like this, you know, like that. Okay. And then maybe one more color. You could put in the, and if you want, you can put another color in. But I just want you to have a chance to use this limited palette that I chose for those look like Turner. I was thinking that we would do a Turner painting in blue and burnt sienna with a little bit of green and yellow thrown in. So you want to try that for 2 minutes while you listen to your music that we're going to play for you?
Okay.
How do you put it down and how do you look at the paper? Just
It's kind of like, I figured it was kind of like automatic writing, right? You know,
yeah, automatic writing or blind contour drawing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, try to get out of your left brain into your right brain, like a little kid playing in kindergarten with their paint. So you got your paper ready and your paint's wet. And first wet the paper and then just start throwing in color for 2 minutes. Oh, the name of the song is Liquid Gold.
Liquid gold lyrics criticized by the cynics, transformed in appearance. A cacophony of booze. Liquid gold lyrics criticized by the cynics, transformed
I thought that was a very good introduction to Turner's work. And I would like to use that as a jumping off place for our demonstration on wet in watercolor. I was especially inspired by the last painting that was shown called Moonlight over Lake Lucerne, painted in 1841. But you notice how in that particular composition it is mostly blue and burnt sienna. And so we are going to keep our palette very limited. It's basically cobalt blue and burnt sienna. But I'm going to add a little phthalo green to the water and a little bit of this to the land. But the first thing we're going to do is paint the entire piece of paper with nothing but water. I'm using a number 1 brush. I'm making it really, really wet because I want this, I'm going to do the sky in one swoop, but I want the whole paper to be wet. It's just that the sky, we'll do the sky first, but I'm keeping it wet all over so that there's a soft edge here, okay? And then I'm going to use my big number 12 brush to paint the water. Now watch what happens when I put this on. See how it's pretty, I have a lot of paint on here, but we want to have a lot of paint and a lot of water, and then let it bleed down. Probably need more water. How much water do you think you can have? Wow, that's amazing. Okay, I'm going back and forth till it feels like I have enough water that it will bleed down a little bit. It's not happening yet. Okay, here we go. I'm adding more water to what I already have. And then I'm hoping to just fade it out with water like this, see? Keep it very, just lighter and lighter as it comes down. Because while it's still wet, you can play with it for quite a while. Down it's almost getting lighter and lighter. Yeah. It was interesting how, even though I put a lot of water, it still wasn't enough to do what I wanted to do. So now, you know, it's going to dry lighter. So I'm going to put a little more. I want it to be very light in the very bottom, almost white. I'm going to lift a little bit of this off while it's still wet. You don't really know what's going to happen until you get it on here. I'm taking a little bit more off the bottom. I want this line to be almost white. Yeah. And then because I want it to be a little darker on the top, I'm going to add some more blue while it's still wet. You have to work fast. That should do it. That should do it. Okay, I'm kind of smoothing some things in. Now you can let it kind of drip down a little. Now I'm raising up the paper. You can see I'm raising it up. Now I'm going to set it up very straight so that it will bleed down a little bit. Maybe help it out a bit. There we go. Okay. That's pretty close to what I want. And then now, while it's still wet down here, I'm going to wet it again because I'm surprised how quickly it dried. I'm going to wet this one to the water. Just don't worry about that. Let it do its thing. And then now we're going to do, I forgot to show you the thumbnail sketch. We'll do that later. Let's do the same thing with the blue water. But notice now the blue water is darker than the sky. So we're going to do the same thing again. But because it's wet, I'll have a nice soft edge there. Even though it's a hard edge, it will be soft. It's not a hard edge, but it's an edge, but it's going to be soft. I'm going to fill this whole water shape in. And when I sent you out the plan for today, you notice I showed you that we have large, medium, and small shapes. And that is a compositional tool. You want to always divide your space up in large, medium, and small. Now because this is a darker value than that, I'm going to add some green to it. It's sort of a blue-green anyway. Watch. There you go. Thank you. All right, see, I'm just putting the green right over the blue. And we'll see how dark it is. We don't know until we begin to look at it for a minute, see if it's how it's drying. But that might be it. I think it needs a little more blue. It does have some green in it, but it also has blue. So while it's still wet, plus remember it's going to dry normally 20% lighter, but probably more than that because the paper is already wet. But because it's wet, you have a lot of time to experiment. There we go. So I'm just adding blue back over the green. There we go. That's perfect. There we go. Now I think that when that dries, I'm squinting to see, but I think it's going to be, I just noticed something though, that the edge is not quite that hard. So while it's still wet, I'm going to soften the edge. Remember how you take all the paint out? I'm going to do it this way because I want to soften that edge, have it not be quite as dark, and kind of blend in with the sky a little bit more than I had it. There we go. So the whole shape is darker than the sky, but the edge is soft. Might even bring it up a little bit. Just a little bit. There we go. I think that will have a nice soft edge, which ocean and water, sky always have a soft edge. Okay, so now while it's drying, let's wet the bottom again. We already wet it, but now we'll wet it again. But you see why I was excited about Turner, because all of his paintings had this wonderful washy look, like when I'm wet. So down here I'm going to start with here we go. So far we've used cobalt blue up here, phthalo green and cobalt blue here, and now we're going to put some burnt sienna down here, which was the other color that Turner used a lot. I know this is a little dark, so I have to be careful to keep it light, because when it dries it's going to be so much the color that we want. Just sort of a pale color. Okay, and then in here I'm going to put the same burnt sienna, but it's going to be dabbled with a little blue to darken it. So this is, but see how fun it is that all the edges are nice and soft, and if they kind of bleed into each other, that's just fine. Just let it happen. Okay, so now let's figure out how to, I want to lighten this right in here, so I'm going to lift this off a little bit right in here. This is like, how do I say it, like sculpting. I'm taking off the burnt sienna so that it's really light. It's almost white. Every time I do that, I wipe it off so that it will lift better. So I'm lifting it now again. Oh, that's nice. So we're always thinking about value. A little light in here too, a little light right there. Okay, maybe a little bit more. One more time. Okay, that's good. And then I'm going to put a little bit of the green in, a puddle of green here, down here, so it looks like the bushes. And over here. And while it's still wet, we'll drop in some blue. And it will bleed and look like plants. See, especially the wet on wet, so nice. Keeps everything very soft. And this is going to be the fastest painting I've ever done, but should encourage you guys to have fun with it. Okay, down here it's really dark, so I'm going to put more blue down here. There's not a whole lot of dark places, but where they are, we definitely need to show them because there's not a lot of contrast in here, but this is enough. Okay, we're almost done. I'm trying to keep this to 10 minutes, I think. So just get you started. You can work on it more later if you want, but this is demo is just to help you get started. And then up here, there's a definite dark spot for the bushes. I want to put just a little accent of yellow. That's the building. Okay. Put a little blue here and put some yellow on top of it. All right, so now we're going to put just a little bit of accent of the yellow that we have here ready to go. And we'll put it here in the bushes down here, maybe up here a little bit. But the main thing is to get everything in while it's still wet, so that it has this wet on wet look. And then put a little bit of yellow in the blue, so it's more of a green. There we go. Yeah, there you go. See if it bleeds. That's exactly what we want. Instead of avoiding it, we're hoping it will bleed. That's kind of a relief. Okay, what do you think? You can decide later. You can decide later what it means. Water, because if you want to get that really beautiful luminous wet on wet look, you're going to have a lot of water, so the paint will dry lighter. And what I meant was, I thought that you were saying that you had that the green got away from you because it was so wet. That's what I yeah, that's what I thought.
To some extent, yes, that's true. That did happen.
Not that you have too much of it, but that you have more than you had planned. But this is just the base coat. This is just your beginning, that if it's loose enough and juicy enough and it's getting away from you enough, then you just come back in and just fix it. You don't, see what I mean? You keep the luminosity of it. You keep the freshness of it.
Uh-huh.
So,
I guess then
so
I
that's
need
part
to
of, for someone who's very much like I am and wanting to control everything, it feels uncomfortable, but it's a good lesson to.
So I guess then what you're saying is the key is not how this is all over, but how you finish it, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just the start. This is
Yeah.
just the beginning. So you guys can do this at home. You can do something else. You can paint something over your wet on wet. You can experiment.
What I would like to direct how I would finish it is to see for the rest of the time how you finish that one.
I didn't really. I didn't. Really.
Because that would be the next step, wouldn't it?
I show it at the end of the demonstration. But, oh, it's right here. I have it right here. I have it right here. See mine. See, mine is that right? Can you see it?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't really go back and do much of anything to it. I mean,
Ah.
I wanted it just to be loose and juicy like Turner.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, thank you.
In fact, I thought it was too tight. It's too tight for what I really wanted to do.
Uh,
Some of yours are, I think, more successful because they're wetter.
uh,
That look of wet on wet and the edges getting away from you. It's sort of like jumping off a cliff. You want to get it as
just do it.
you can,
Yeah.
but you're open for surprises. That's what I guess I want to say. You want to be open for surprises. So you don't know what you're going to get.
Addressing the too much water, if it's possible to have that. I found I had to pull out an old paper because I'm running out of paper. I'm gonna have to order paper. Anyway, so it's like the paper was old enough and had been painted. I'd done a very abstract with not a lot of paint on the back side of it. That when I wet it, the water, it went clear through, and it's completely soggy.
Yeah, mine too.
And so it seemed to affect, let's say,
I'm sure.
the way the paint reacted on the paper quite a bit.
That's
So
unusual. I think that's unusual to have the water go through the paper.
yeah, that's overkill.